We good? Thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm Mark Batnick, 97th District, joined today by Representative Amy Ellick and Leader David Welter. Thank you very much for coming. As we know, there's an overarching yet constantly ignored need for change and reform in Illinois. We saw it in November when voters overwhelmingly said, stop trying to raise taxes to fix the problems the General Assembly created. We see it every day when our friends, family, neighbors continue to leave Illinois for states with more opportunity and an honest government. While over 600 bills, and I think it's actually close to 700 bills, were approved out of committee and sent to the Illinois House floor for this week's debate, nothing contained the substantive reforms that we need to take and move the state forward. Issues like pension and property tax reform affect our constituents on a day-to-day basis. We need to take legislation addressing these issues up on the House floor and debate approaches to solving our state's largest problems. We discussed last month in our launch of the Reimagine Illinois various problems our state faces and offered a platform of ideas with over 80 bills introduced with solutions. I spoke further about ending our state's longtime culture of corruption and have said until we have better ethics laws, we will never be able to permanently solve our state budget issues. When I was reappointed spokesperson for the House Personnel and Pension Committee, I spoke about how I looked forward to continuing to find a bipartisan, substantive solution to ensure the prosperous future for Illinoisans in regard to our pension systems. We need to work together to find these solutions, not just for our pension crisis, but for all the major issues that affect Illinoisans, including ethics reforms and property taxes. We need to see action on legislation for fiscal, ethics, and pension reforms that will get Illinois back on track. And with that, I will turn it over to Representative Amy Ellick.
Good morning. I'm State Representative Amy Ellick from the 111th District. When we took the oath of office on January 13th of this year, it was a historic moment. The House of Representatives elected a new Speaker of the House who pledged to be open and accessible so we can all, quote, work together to solve the very serious issues in this state. Here we are with 45 days until session adjournment, and the Democrat-controlled legislature has failed to put forth any meaningful or substantive legislation dealing with fighting corruption, providing tax relief, and unfortunately, no plan put forth to adopt a balanced budget. In January, the Democrats demanded new leadership. They were tired of the status quo of one man controlling the chamber with his House rules. They demanded new House rules and committed to a new way of governing the chamber. Yet we saw those House rules barely change in ink. The fundamental principles of full control to one person continued, and Democrats promised that these rules weren't final, and the, quote, Democratic Caucus Working Group would be making or changing more rules. And on Tuesday of this week, members were distributed the House Rules book at the beginning of the session. So much for those changes. House Democrats broke their promise of working together and went back to their old ways of doing business by voting to suspend their own rules in order to adopt nearly 300 bills on the consent calendar, of which 73% of the bills approved on the consent calendar were bills sponsored by Democrats, and only 27% of the bills were sponsored by Republicans. Even more astonishing is the fact that out of 697 bills passed out of committee, 82% of the bills were sponsored by Democrats, with only 18% of the bills sponsored by Republicans. It doesn't appear that the House Democratic leadership wants to, quote, work together to solve the very serious issues in this state. It appears to be the opposite. Just more of the same, Democrats pushing their own agenda, conducting their business the way Mike Madigan taught them. I will now turn it over to my colleague, Representative David Welter.
Good morning. I am State Representative David Welter from Morris. I represent the 75th District, which includes portions of Grundy, Kendall, LaSalle, and Will counties. Unfortunately, we have seen nothing from the Speaker or the majority party on the issue of ethics reform. It's been 18 months since former State Representative Louis Arroyo was charged with bribery and forced to resign from the General Assembly. Yet no bills have been passed to strengthen our ethics laws in Illinois. It's been more than a year since late Senator Martin Sandoval resigned from the Illinois Senate and pleaded guilty to federal bribery and tax charges. Yet, here we are, no bills have been passed to strengthen our ethics laws in Illinois. It's been 9 months since ComEd was charged in a years-long bribery scheme that implicated then Speaker Mike Madigan, yet no bills have been filed to strengthen our ethics laws. How many more cases of corruption need to be exposed before House Democrats act on ethics reform? Since assuming the gavel in January, Speaker Welch has said repeatedly in public that ethics needs to be a priority. It's been more than 3 months, and we've yet to see one initiative introduced by his majority on this topic. The fact is, we're still debating reforms that could have easily been agreed to and passed months ago by this body. We can start exposing and eliminating conflicts of interest among legislators. We've been talking about it for how long? We know where the issues are. Conflicts of interest and economic disclosure statements give citizens the ability to hold their lawmakers accountable. Illinois should adopt a model of disclosure that'll expose conflicts and help end the culture of corruption. While we're on the topic of conflicts of interest, let's acknowledge the need to ban legislators from simultaneously working as a lobbyist for private industry and special interest groups. Allowing members of the General Assembly to also be government consultants and lobbyists has created dysfunction. An outright lobbying ban for General Assembly members will stop this practice immediately and start cleaning up our government. The overall point that we would like to get across today is that we should be able to come together and act on a bipartisan basis to root out corruption in state government. House Republicans have been ready to work with the Speaker to accomplish this from day one. We hope that the Speaker and the House Democrats are listening and are willing to start working with us to back up their own promises with meaningful, specific action in the form of legislation. I do want to note as well here, we had printed off from the Ethics and Elections Committee all the numerous bills, dozens and dozens of bills that have to do with ethics that unfortunately were not part of the larger bills that we saw come out of committee. Again, we gave you all those examples of fellow colleagues who have been charged, and still, each example more egregious than the next. No action has come from Springfield, no legislation actually being considered before the full body. And we are ready, we're willing, we have bills out there, and we think it's time for us to pass them.